Alrighty.
So how you feeling?
Yeah, I feel good, man. It's day one.
What's up, Sentinels? This is Universe Unique, and today, the truth comes out. Some still think putting Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland side by side is a fair fight, but when you coldly break down their feats, it's clear it's nowhere near balanced. And no, this isn't nostalgia talking. It's pure combat analysis, scene by scene, villain by villain. Before we dive into the details, I gotta ask, we're just one step away from hitting a huge milestone here on the channel. When you subscribe, you're not just a number. You're making sure we keep delivering these deep dives, showing what no one else dares to. Your click helps keep this space sharp and real, cutting through all the hype and official versions. Think about it. While Tom needed the MCU's most advanced suit and still struggled with threats like Otto Octavius, Tobey, even at a low point in Spider-Man 2, was already handling that same villain with ease. It might sound like a small detail, but that's exactly where the real weight difference starts. And what comes after this initial comparison will change everything you thought about the MCU's Spider. Now tell me, what city and country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this content is connecting you to the real truths of the multiverse, smash that like and join our secret subscriber squad. The Dr. Octopus has always been a game changer in testing the resistance and technique of any Spider-Man. In No Way Home, Tom Holland entered this battle with everything the MCU could offer. The Iron Spider suit, additional mechanical arms, and genuine rage after Otto threatened to kill MJ. It was the kind of situation where Peter wouldn't hold back, putting all his strength into his blows. Even so, Octavius not only resisted, but managed to dominate the fight, immobilizing Tom and taking control of the situation. It is true that Tom was in an environment with civilians nearby, which limited some actions, but the scene leaves no doubt. Otto had a clear advantage. Now, when we look at the same villain facing Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 2, the context is even more impressive. Tobey was weakened, with his powers failing and constant physical wear throughout the film. In addition, he carried a huge emotional burden, as he saw Otto as a figure of respect, almost a mentor, and this naturally made him hold back some blows. Despite all these disadvantages, Tobey managed to stay on the same level as Otto, and later, when he regained his powers, he turned the game so decisively that Octavius had to resort to tricks and traps to capture him. In the background, and in Octavius's own dialogue, it is implied that he recognized Tobey was stronger. This difference becomes even more glaring when you put side by side the Otto who won. Tom was the same kind of threat that Tobey at his peak controlled with relative ease. It's not a matter of opinion, it's a direct comparison of performance against the same enemy. And there's a detail that most people don't realize. When a character is able to overcome the opponent, even in a physically inferior condition, it not only proves that he is stronger, but that his power ceiling is much higher than what has been shown. And it is precisely this ceiling that begins to explain why, in terms of sheer strength and experience, Tobey plays in another league. The Green Goblin is the kind of adversary that tests not only a hero's physical strength, but also their mental capacity. In No Way Home, Tom Holland faces Norman Osborn in two crucial moments. In the building fight, Tom lands direct blows, without holding back, but the Goblin absorbs each impact with a disturbing smile. This reaction is not just theatrical. It shows that the villain was taking the full brunt of Tom's blows and still maintaining control of the situation. In the final showdown, already without moral constraints and willing to kill, Tom unleashes his full offensive potential, but Norman continues to resist and even finds openings to return the pressure. If we go back to Spider-Man from 2002, we see a completely different scenario. Tobey Maguire faced the same Norman Osborn on 3 occasions and won them all. Even when he was holding back his strength to avoid killing the opponent, Tobey could control the fight and impose his rhythm. The Goblin himself recognized. He acknowledged this by calling him practically invincible and stating that only he could stop him. In the final battle, Norman had already tried to weaken Tobey in every way. He put children in danger to divide his attention, blew up a bomb directly in his face, and resorted to brutal hand-to-hand attacks. Still, Tobey turned the situation around, brought the villain to the point of begging for mercy, and defeated him. This dominance becomes more evident when we remember that, years later, in Spider-Man 3, Tobey, now more mature and even stronger, faced Harry Osborn in his new Goblin form, which had a more advanced arsenal and superior physical strength to Norman's. Nevertheless, Tobey emerged victorious, which alone establishes a clear line. If Tom Holland encounters resistance against Norman in the height of his fury, and Tobey controls both Norman and an even more powerful Goblin, the weight of this difference cannot be ignored. And there is still an underestimated factor: fighting style. Tobey withstands and responds to attacks that not only require strength, but also impact absorption and quick recovery, something that is rarely seen in Tom's fights. This point, which almost no one comments on, is what paves the way for the next comparison, when the battle ceases to be pure resistance and enters the territory of brute physical strength. This is where the Lizard comes in. The confrontation against the Lizard in No Way Home exposed a clear pattern in Tom Holland's physical limitations. From the first encounter, Connors showed an advantage in the body, using its brute force and reach to dominate the space. Tom needed to resort to external help, using Ned's portals to create openings and repositioning. Even so, victory only came through a joint effort and not through individual dominance over the villain. This dependence on external factors indicates that, alone, MCU's Peter did not have total control of the situation. Looking at Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man, which serves as an intermediate reference, we see a slightly more balanced performance against Connors, even though Andrew also faced difficulties. The important detail is that Andrew, in No Way Home, manages to neutralize the Lizard more directly, using only his own preparation and agility. This puts Tom in a position of lesser physical impact in the comparison between the variants. On the other hand, Tobey Maguire, despite never having faced the Lizard in his own trilogy in cinemas, showed a completely different posture during the joint combat in No Way Home. During the fight at the Statue of Liberty, Tobey manages to keep Connors busy and even gain a physical advantage at certain moments, something that Tom did not demonstrate at any point without support. And if we expand this analysis to the fighting patterns Tobey presented against opponents of similar strength, such as Venom and Sandman himself, the coherence remains. He deals better with enemies who use brute force as their main weapon. This type of confrontation is what sets them apart. Point resistance of dominant force. Tom, even with his technology and sharp reflexes, does not demonstrate the same instinctive control over large enemies. Tobey, on the other hand, treats this type of opponent as familiar territory, and it is precisely in the territory of pure destructive power that we come to the next adversary, the one that even the most prepared versions of Spider-Man against the wall, Electro. Electro is an opponent that exposes the ability to absorb damage and resistance under constant attack. In No Way Home, the first interaction between Tom Holland and Max Dillon makes the imbalance clear. A single energy blast from Electro is enough to knock Tom down and leave him vulnerable, forcing Sandman to intervene to contain the threat. Even in later attempts, MCU's Peter can only neutralize Max with direct assistance, without gaining a real advantage in hand-to-hand combat. Andrew Garfield, coming directly from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, had already faced Electro before and knew his attack pattern. In No Way Home, Andrew manages to maintain the exchange of blows for longer, even recognizing that Max became stronger after absorbing the arc reactor. Still, his visible resistance is lower than Tobey's. And this is where the difference stands out. Tobey Maguire, without armored suit, without technological enhancements, and without prior preparation against this specific villain, withstands direct attacks from a more powerful version of Electro without showing any signs. Clear signs of pain or wear. Pain. While Andrew and Tom react with visible discomfort to each discharge, Tobey maintains focus on the strategic situation, concerned with the possibility of Octavius switching sides and not with his own physical integrity. This indicates not only superior resistance, but also a stronger combat mentality. It is worth noting that, in the comics, confrontations with Electro almost always favor the villain when the hero does not have a protective barrier, since electricity can instantly paralyze or incapacitate. Tobey, on screen, breaks this expectation and redefines the parameter of physical resistance among the variants. And if he already demonstrates this advantage against pure electricity, when the threat comes in the form of a massive body like Sandman's, the balance continues to tilt in the same direction. It is exactly this type of confrontation that leads us to the next point. Sandman is a curious case because, in the MCU, his presence in No Way Home functions more as a barrier and a temporary ally for Tom Holland than as an enemy to be overcome. However, when the situation is reversed, Tom does not show a clear advantage in direct combat. His interaction with Flint Marko is limited and depends on the context of the group fight, without the weight of a prolonged and isolated confrontation. On the other hand, Tobey Maguire has a direct history against Sandman in Spider-Man 3. In this film, he faces the giant version of Sandman in the middle of the city, dodging large-scale blows and entering ways to cause real damage, such as destroying part of his hands and attacking his face directly. It is important to highlight that, even against an enemy practically immune to conventional attacks, Tobey manages to exploit loopholes in Marko's sandy body to reverse the combat. This requires not only physical strength, but also battle reading and quick adaptation, skills that he had already shown in fights against more unpredictable villains, such as Venom. Another relevant point is that, according to the logic presented in Sam Raimi's own trilogy, Tobey becomes stronger over the years. This means that the older and more experienced Tobey from No Way Home would have an even more dominant performance against Sandman than we saw in Spider-Man 3. This detail is essential when compared to Tom, who, even with reinforced suits and technological support, would probably be closer to the strength level of an early career Tobey than the veteran we recently saw. If against a shape-shifting and resistant opponent like Sandman, Tobey already demonstrates mastery, the next step is to understand why his superiority is not limited to physical strength. When the fight requires strategy, adaptation, and accumulated experience, the balance continues to favor the original Spider-Man. And this brings us to the next point. Tom Holland brings to the battlefield an advantage that Tobey Maguire never had: total integration with Stark technology. Armored suits, automatic combat modes, web, specialized suits, and, of course, the Iron Spider, with mechanical arms capable of extending reach and strength. On paper, this seems decisive. But, in practice, when we analyze real confrontations, technology doesn't make up for the difference in experience and physical resilience. A clear example is Tom's battle against Dr. Octopus using the Iron Spider. Even with the additional strength and resources, like the mechanical arms for counterattacks, Tom couldn't impose absolute dominance. Octavius, a villain with a combat anatomy similar to the suits, still found openings to neutralize him. And if we remember that Tobey, in Spider-Man 2, faced Otto without any external reinforcement and still managed to contain him, it's clear that the difference is not in equipment, but in physical foundation and fighting instinct. Furthermore, Tobey's organic webbing offers a strategic advantage that few mention. It is unlimited and doesn't depend on cartridges, meaning he never runs the risk of running out of one of the most important resources in combat. Tom, on the other hand, uses artificial webs that, besides being able to run out, have been shown to be less resistant, something Tobey proved by tearing Andrew's webbing, which in the movie is strong enough to contain the lizard. Another factor is Tobey's familiarity with enemies who have anatomy or abilities similar to his own. He has already faced Venom, a physically superior opponent with spider-like reflexes, and still found a way to win. This shows that the key lies not in the technology, but in the physical foundation and fighting instinct. The type of hands-on experience against a distorted mirror is something Tom has not fully lived yet. Technology can offer shortcuts, but it does not replace years of real combat against high-level enemies. And it is this combination of strength, instinct, and background that prepares us for the conclusion. Because when you weigh everything, physical, psychological, and adaptability, the answer to who wins this dispute becomes evident. Putting all the confrontations side by side, it is impossible to ignore the pattern. Tobey Maguire demonstrates physical superiority against every villain who, at some point, put Tom Holland in trouble. Whether Otto Octavius, Norman Osborn, the Lizard, Electro, or even Sandman himself, the history shows that Tobey not only withstands better, but often finishes the fights in less favorable conditions. Tom compensates for some of this difference with technology, but in pure mano a mano, the advantage leans towards the veteran. Experience is also a decisive factor. Tobey has years of direct combat against threats that require strategy and emotional control. He has faced stronger or more complex versions of enemies that Tom has encountered, and he has won. In a current fight, with no restrictions, and both in top form, the most likely scenario is Tobey controlling the pace from the beginning, neutralizing Tom's technological advantages, and exploiting every opening as he has done countless times in the past. This is not a matter of preference or nostalgia. It is the result of a comparative analysis. Performance objective. Tom Holland is more agile at certain moments, has access to cutting-edge resources, and is more integrated into the modern world of the MCU, but Tobey Maguire imposes himself with strength, endurance, and combat intelligence forged on the battlefield, something that technology cannot replace. If you've made it this far, you've already noticed that this type of analysis goes far beyond what is normally seen in fan discussions. And that's exactly why your support is crucial. We are about to reach an important milestone here on the channel, and each new subscription strengthens our ability to continue bringing this level of depth and comparison that respects the intelligence of the fan. By subscribing, you ensure that these analyses continue to happen without cuts and without filters. Before I finish, I want to know, which city and country are you watching this video from? Comment down below. I will read them all. And if this comparison has opened up new angles for you, go ahead and leave a like and join our secret line of subscribers.